Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the ranch truck here. We had a failure in the back on the rear end. I want to show you guys that. Nothing big. We're going to take care of it today. So let's go dig into it. All right, guys, like I said, we had a failure in the back of the highboy on the rear end. It is nothing major. Everything still works fine. It still runs and drives, but we are leaking differential fluid. You see a little bit of puddle over there? Over there is where it was setting, and it leaked almost, I think, pretty much all of the gear oil out of this thing. What happened was we've had a massive cold spell here in Oklahoma, some Arctic weather, like most of the country has here in January of 24, I guess, if you're not watching this here recently. But we have some low water crossings on our roads, and those things froze over, then the water went above it and then froze over, and we're just getting thick and thick of ice. And I was driving over it with my truck, and I busted through. And yeah, the rear end just bottomed out on the ice when the tires busted through, and I was stuck. So I had to have my brother pull me out. Not a big deal. When I got back to the shop, the thing was leaking diff fluid. Now, this thing has done this to me in the past when I jacked up the rear end with a floor jack and busted the seal on the rear cover. I think the lip of the cover is hanging over the bottom, and I think that ice, when I was pulled off, you know, jarred that cover enough to break the seal, because it's just silicone on, and now we're leaking. So really, it's just a failure of the seal, so that's not a big deal. I kind of over-exaggerated when I said failure, but it still is a failure, and if I didn't address it, we're going to have a major failure in the rear end with it running dry on lubricant. So we're going to take care of that. We're kind of having a decently warm day today. It's still a little chilly, and of course, the shop is full of junk. I don't have enough room to pull this thing in, and I don't want to take the time to clean out stuff to get this thing in the shop. So we're just going to take care of it out here. But I had a subscriber on YouTube comment just today, and I thought, man, what a coincidence that we're working on this truck. He said, Christmas Yard Art commented, "Hello, new subscriber. Just bought a 69 F250 Ranger. Cool truck. Could you do a how-to on checking the pumpkin and greasing the axle? Thanks." So, yeah, I get a lot of comments about this all the time, either on my Instagram, Cubic Motorsports, or my YouTube channel. Just, you know, general how-tos, or what I do here, or how I do this, or what parts I buy. And a lot of times I just reply to those comments or messages and stuff like that just to help guys out. But this time I thought, since we're going to be doing maintenance on the ranch truck here, I just show you guys in a video. So I hope this is enjoyable for you guys. Give me a comment down below if you like this kind of stuff, and I might be doing some more of this in the future. I know the last time we worked on this truck, I did the brake booster. You guys liked that video, so we're going to continue that trend hopefully with this one. But first step is we're going to be taking that rear diff cover off and making sure it's still flat and we're not damaged in any way where it's not going to be able to seal. I got a pan here to drain the fluid out, and I have some some Dana Spicer Victor Rhines silicone I've had for a long time. I haven't used, so I'm going to use that so I get OE stuff on this axle. Maybe it'll seal better. Well, I don't think so. We'll find out. But drain the fluid. There's probably going to be a little bit of oil left in there. We're going to drain that out. I'm just going to put new 80/90 in it, and we'll go from there. Let's go dig into it. All right, we're here under the truck. Under normal circumstances, you get all these bolts loose, and this cover's not going to come, you know, pop loose and drain all your oil, because typically they're stuck on with silicone. But if you do have a gasket, sometimes it can pop loose when you're loosening stuff, so it's always a good idea to have a pan underneath it to catch it, just in case it lets go when you're not expecting it to. This one, I just know that we are leaking already, so I know the seal's broken down here. So just gonna go after it. Typically, when this thing's full of fluid, I leave these top two right here still in the differential housing, and then I pop it loose, and then it drains the fluid nice and evenly. So we'll see how much is still in here. There might be, I don't know if it's half full, quarter full, or what it is, so we'll find out, I guess. That bottom was loose. I can already tell our diff cover's bent up, so we're going to be straightening that out. I'm going to have to get a socket to break those others loose if I can't get it with this. You can tell I didn't torque all these down to the same spec. Alright, I gotta go get a wrench. I'll be back. Alright, here I did and forgot about my rule. I just told you guys about leaving 2 in here so we don't just make a huge mess if this differential cover decides to pop off. I don't think it's going to, because it's still glued on all the way around here. So there we go. All right, we're all loose now. Oh, forgot one. There we go. Typically, I just use a screwdriver and a hammer and start getting the cover to pop loose. Sometimes they're more stubborn than other times. There it goes. Yeah, we're going to have quite a bit of fluid in there. Probably should have just caught this, because it's probably still pretty good. It's probably a year and a half ago the last time I had this off, so that fluid's probably just fine. But since we're here, we'll go ahead and give it a fluid change and call her good. So I'm going to let that drain out. As you can see here, the cover, if we didn't have these bolts on here, it could have just popped loose and all that fluid would have come out at once, which would have been faster but less controlled. So trying to control it. But since it's so cold, it's pretty thick, so it may have not just made a mess. But it's good to show you guys what I would do under normal situations. Give us a little bit more room to play with our bolts. We can get a screwdriver in here and turn it sideways. There we go. Now we're going. You guys can see that. So it looks like we were pretty low, but not dangerously low. So I didn't drive this thing home yesterday. I probably could have. One thing about a gear oil is it's always, the leak always looks worse than it is. It takes a lot of gear oil to make a big leak, or a little bit of gear oil to make a big leak, I guess I should say. All right, I think we can take this cover off here now. Looks like I had about a quart, maybe a quart and a half in there. stuck on here pretty good up top. There we go. And there we go. There's our ring and pinion. Oh yeah. Here's the this thing wasn't perfect when I put it together. You can see there's a chip in the ring gear. You can see that, but it still runs fine, especially for what this truck does. It doesn't see any highway use. It's babied pretty much. Doesn't make any noise. It looks all good, except that, but there's no chunks in the bottom, so that's old. So yeah, I'm gonna get the cover cleaned up and get this seal here cleaned up, and we'll goop some more silicone on. I think we got to work on that cover. I think we bent it, but we'll see how that goes, and we'll get it all cleaned up. So back in the shop here, inspecting the diff cover. There is a little bit of metal in there, if you can see, if I can get the camera to focus. And that a little bit is to be expected in a differential. Maybe not after a year, and only like probably maximum of 5,000 miles. So we're just going to pretend we didn't see that and call it good to go. But right here is the problem. If you can see that, it caught the bottom edge of my diff cover and bent it right there. So that is where our leak came from. Bent the cover and then broke the seal right here and just leaked everything out the bottom. So I'm going to straighten that out. Then we're going to clean everything up and clean up this surface, and then clean out the diff cover really good and make sure all that silicone is not left inside there. And we'll slab some more on there and go to town. Alright, well I have the diff cover pretty much cleaned out, good enough for now, and I got that in there kind of straightened out. Still got a little bit of a wobble in it, but I think it's good enough. There's had to straighten up that bolt hole was sticking towards the diff housing this way, and I straightened that out as best I could because that is going to cause a problem as well. But when I put this together, I'm going to put the silicone on this and kind of let it set up. Definitely let it kind of get a little tacky before I put it on, and that'll help keep up with any inconsistencies. Makes it a little thicker when it squeezes it together, so it causes a little bit better seal. So I gotta go clean that housing on the truck, and we'll get that silicone on this. All right, well, this stuff's been on here for about an hour. It's still not very set up. It feels exactly the same as whenever I put it on. I think that's because of the temperature, probably. I'm tired of waiting, so I'm going to slap it on there and call it good. All right, one thing to note is there's still a little bit of gear oil leaking out of the bottom of this. That needs to be cleaned, or it will compromise your seal on your silicone. So got that out cleaned off and enough wiped away so it doesn't start dripping before I get the cover on there. I'll get a bolt ready. Now, ideally, I would have a reusable gasket for this. That's always best. But I don't have one on hand. And we're working with what we got. That wasn't very clean. It's on there, though. Another trick for getting a better seal on this would be just kind of loosely tighten these bolts and then let it set overnight, and then come back in and give it another torque. It's going to be pretty darn chilly tomorrow. I think we're supposed to have a wind chill of -14, and I'm not going to crawl into here and do that, so we're just going to send her home, because I don't want to have to be under here again and dealing with this. We're going to get the rest of these bolts in here, and I am going to torque them to exact factory specifications with my Milwaukee Impact. After doing enough of these, you know the exact right amount of trigger pulls to get the correct torque spec. And if you could tell by whenever I took this apart, I am very accurate. I'm joking, by the way. You really should torque these. I'm just not doing it because ranch truck, you know. Alright, it is installed. Now there is a little bit of lip right here, and I'm guessing that is what caused all my problems with this thing leaking. So I might take a grinder and grind that lip off so it doesn't catch anything anymore. That'll probably be smart. We'll see if I actually get it done. Next step would be take the fill plug out and top it off with 80/90. So we'll get after that. Alright, got my gear oil down here. It's time to top this thing off. Now the trick when filling these is you fill it up basically until the oil gets to the bottom of this plug, and then you're done. There are some diff covers I've seen, aftermarket diff covers anyway, that have the plug up higher. I'm not sure the reasoning behind that, but you definitely shouldn't overfill your diff. There's no benefit at all. It's going to create extra drag and extra, you're going to work the fluid more than it should, basically. Because when this is running, the level drops way down to a real down level to where the ring gear isn't submerged in all that oil all the time, so it's easier to move and work, and it flows around and lubricates everything. If you have it too full, basically there's too much oil that ring gear is fighting against, and it'll make it run hot and overwork your fluid. I hope my pump isn't going out. I think I'm overextending it. Also, you don't want too much oil going out to your tubes. If you can see here, this fluid level is just to the bottom of these tubes, so it shouldn't really be flowing out and running out in the tubes. For one, that'd be a lot more oil, and two, you don't want to overfill your tubes. So whenever this is working, it's running oil up to the pinion and also making oil splash out here, and it runs down the axles and lubricates your bearings out there on the full floater rear end. So anyway, I've also seen diff covers that have dipsticks and plugs at the top, which that just adds complexity, but I guess it makes it easier to check. Anyway, guys, I'm going to fill this up, and then I'll catch back with you whenever I get it full. Alright, well, I was going to try to turn the camera back on before I got it full, but we are right at the top. You can see that the fluid level is right there. So just running out. That's where I like to put them. We'll get the plug back in here, and this repair is complete. Boom. So easy as that. It wasn't that big of a deal. Just had to get the cover resealed and everything, so we're good for another year, I guess. I guess I'm gonna grind this bottom off here, so hopefully I will not be doing this again in the near future. But while I'm back here, I thought I would point out some things. If you have a truck or a highboy or something and you're wanting to get it back on the road, and it's been off the road for a long time and you don't know exactly where to start, this will just be some general overview pointers on the chassis, on things to check and look for, and just things in general to keep an eye out for whenever you're getting something on the road that's been off the road for a long time, especially these old Ford trucks. Back here, I want to mention the drum brakes. Things that can go bad back here will be your wheel seal, which is what seals the fluid from that we just put in here, the gear oil, from running out the hub basically into the drum, the brake drum here. So you can have oil leaking out of here, and usually it'll drip on the tire, and you'll see that. And also the wheel cylinder can leak. A lot of times if you get something going, it won't be leaking, but then you start using it and then it'll start to leak and you blow the seals out because they're old and brittle and hard. So those are things to look for, especially after you've been driving it. But if it's been sitting, you can check for moisture down here dripping off the drum onto your tire, and you'll know that you have some issues there. If you can see on this one, it had been doing it before, and see how it's all greasy. So that one had been leaking before, and I fixed it. So you can tell it was leaking by how greasy it is in there. And usually when they're all greasy, that means your brake shoes are all covered in grease and oil, and I replace them because they are never going to work the same after that. So just some things to check back here. Also, you need to check your vent line. These things are more often than not plugged up, and that can cause those wheel cylinders to leak, or the wheel seals to leak. What happens is, this is the vent for your differential, and as it heats up, things expand, and it needs to vent and vent off pressure. If this is plugged up, there's going to be pressure inside this differential, and it will cause leaks. So it'll leak out your pinion, and it'll leak out your wheel seals. So that can cause problems, and a lot of times your seals can be good, and it's just the plugged vent, and people are replacing seals and they can't get it to stop leaking. Well, it's the plugged vent, and just because it has a hose and the end's open doesn't mean it's not plugged up right here at the fitting. A lot of times they get plugged up right here just from debris in the differential housing. So those are some things to check back here on the rear end. Now we're going to move our way forward through the truck. Okay, moving forward with the truck, you can actually see my pinion seal is leaking a little bit. I didn't know that. Just coming up here and looking at it, it's not leaking that bad. And if you remember, I said it takes a very big leak of gear oil for it to be a difference. This is a tiny leak. If it was a bigger leak, everything would be covered in gear oil, and it just soaks everything up, and it'll just be gear oil everywhere. It look like a huge leak when really it's really not that much. So gear oil leaks always look bigger than they typically are. Moving on from that, I also noticed that I have a bushing out on my leaf spring. That's another thing to check. It will not keep you from using the truck, although it will make it either set funny, set lower on one side, and make noise as well. But you can see that the bushing is completely shot out of that rear leaf spring, so I kind of need to do that. I replaced the front leaf springs when I built this truck, but I didn't replace the rear ones, and now it's coming back to bite me. I should have just replaced them whenever I built it. This one is still good, although you can tell it's getting kind of pushed out there. The rubber part is getting pushed out there, but it looks like it's still holding the truck up anyway. So the leaf spring bushings aren't a massive deal, but they are something you have to consider when you're rebuilding a truck. If you want it to be all nice and tight, you're gonna have to replace those, which it is a pain to do them if you're replacing them on the old leaf springs. Generally, if they're really old leaf springs, I recommend just getting new ones because it's going to be a lot better spring because the old ones do get wear out, the leaf springs. Moving on to the drive shaft, U-joints are another big thing to check. These are nice and tight. I checked them whenever I built the truck, and your splines in your drive shaft, just check them, make sure they're not wore out. And there is grease zerks on here, so while you're down here checking them, you just give them a shot of grease. I greased these not long ago, last time I serviced the truck. Another thing to check, there is a vent line on the transfer case. This one here looks like I have some dirt in there. I need to make sure it's clear. And that's another thing to check, because this thing can leak oil the same way the rear differential can if that vent line is plugged up. Now, specifically on these Dana 24s, for some reason these things like to eat up the bearings in the for the input and output shafts, or the rollers in between the two. And these are nice and tight, but sometimes they can get a lot of play in here, and you have to completely strip down the transfer case to fix them. So that's something to take a look at. This one is nice and tight, and you can run it with some play. It just might make some noise and stuff if you're really working it hard. Another thing to check on the transfer case is the bushings, the rubber bushings here. These, I checked them whenever I put this truck together and didn't replace them, but you can have blown out bushings in your transfer case. Is going to be loose, and anytime you try to really load the truck, especially in four-wheel drive, that transfer case will like to move and jump around on you. And on the later trucks, they even put a rod from the cross member here to the transfer case to help alleviate that. But good thing to check, if your bushings are blown out, your transfer case shouldn't just fall out of the truck. There should be washers inside of that if they do wear out, they just fall down to this plate here, and hopefully your transfer case doesn't fall out of the truck. But just something to check. And another thing with oil levels is your transfer case. That's what these two plugs here are for. This is your drain plug, this is your fill plug. I fill it all the way up, just like the rear differential, to that top plug there, and then put a cap in it. And those seals up there like to leak as well. I think mine was leaking, and I put enough AT205 to make these things stop leaking. Either that or it's out of oil. So your front drive shafts, typically we see a lot of play in the splines on the yokes. That should actually be up here on the transfer case. Somebody put this drive shaft on backwards. But check U-joints and play in the bearings. And same goes for your intermediate shaft. This truck is being held up in gear right now, so I can't spin it. But check your U-joints for play, and your spline here to make sure nothing's just sloppy loose. And I guess the next step is all the way up the front axle. All right, up here on the front end of this truck, just some things to check that are a little bit different than most. Mainly the closed knuckle portion of this axle here. But just like the rear, the leaf spring bushings up here do get shot, and the bushings in the frame that are up there, they are a pain to replace. So it's best to do it whenever you have plans to do it, not when you don't plan to do it, basically. And also these the spring hangers up here, they like to get wallered out. Just make sure that your bolt's not gonna come apart, or you're gonna lose your leaf spring or something right there. It won't fall out of place, it'll be stuck up here in this pocket, but it's best to not have that thing bouncing around up there, especially if you flex the truck any and a leaf spring pops out. That'd be a bad day. Looks like I have a coolant leak, so that's great. We're just gonna pretend we didn't see that. And then fill plug on here in the front end, just like the rear end. Typically these things don't see a lot of use, so I wouldn't really worry about changing the front end fluid. As long as it looks okay, it's probably just fine. But do check it to make sure there is fluid in there. And the outer ends here, this is a small ball Dana 44, the 3,300 pound weight rating axle. These high boys could also have an HD where this is a lot bigger. So if this looks different than your axle, that's the reason why. But same thing goes with this. With the wheel cylinders, they can leak here, and you'll see it dripping out here on the tire. But these things here are particular because they take a special kind of oil. I get mine from Torque King. It's they call it closed knuckle lubricant. It comes in like a caulk gun tube, and it's like a really thick oil, or like a really thin grease, basically, kind of in between. You can see some of it leaking out there. I did replace these seals whenever I put this truck together, and those things tend to go bad on any old truck you have and all the fluid is out of them. So if that's the case, I would recommend putting new seals in it and getting that topped off, because that is what lubricates your bearings as well as your U-joints in your axle shaft there. So that goes both sides there. There is a plug on the back side. I can't show you there, but it looks just like this. And basically I fill it up to that. It tells on the tube torque keying, it shows how much for a small ball and how much for a big ball, and tells you how much to put in there. Another thing before you drive an old highboy is to check your steering components, because they do get wore out. There's not a steering stabilizer on these trucks, and they're pretty tough on joints. I replaced these when I put the truck together, so I know they're good, but these tie rod ends can go bad, as well as the center drag lead. Now, unfortunately, these things are incredibly hard to find. This was a good used one I had. Looks like it's working a little bit there. You can see that there. Need to keep an eye on it to make sure nothing's going to come apart here. But unfortunately, there is one company that's making a replacement, but usually they're out of stock last time I checked. So there are some aftermarket solutions that are on the marketplace that hopefully you can find if you need one. But that's definitely something to check. So the steering components are important on these things, because if it goes wrong, you're going to have a fun ride. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little quick episode of me doing some repair work on the rear end of my ranch truck here, and just answering some viewer questions on just things to look over on the drivetrain of an old truck. You know, not necessarily, it doesn't have to necessarily be a highboy, and all the things specifically I told you on here. You can apply it to any truck, a two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, any kind of make and model. Just kind of go through it and make sure all your fluids are topped off, your U-joints are good, and mainly your steering components are all going to be safe, and your brakes as well. So those are just some pointers to look for and how to fill up and top off those kind of fluids if you need to. So if you guys enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments. I'll try to do some more of this quick videos for you guys. If you have any questions you'd like to answer in more detail like this one, leave me down in the comments below, and maybe I'll answer them on a future episode. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.